You've been to many inspiring sessions today, and welcome to the final session of today's academic festival. And don't forget, we have rising stars of students who's giving poster sessions after this session. It's on the first and second floor of the Zenko Hall, and there's also a poster session, networking opportunities for everyone to go as well. Also, given this moment, I'm going to also talking about supporting student scholarships is the top priority of our historic campaign. As President Susan Furman mentioned this morning, we are very close to our 300 million campaign. So we hope you will join us in getting to our goal and supporting student scholarships. And you will find more information at the TC Fund table in main hall. Another major focus of the campaign is to align with the mission of the Alumni Council is to increasing our alumni engagement. We are here to give more information about how to connect with our wonderful students, scholars, and alumni in the future, now, currently. So if you do have questions, please come to me and my colleagues with a yellow-orange ribbon on their name tag, and we are happy to answer any questions. So without further ado, I will just speak a little bit about today's session. I will turn to our distinguished speakers. This year's academic festival has featured an exciting array of speakers and topics that have highlighted how TC continues to advance learning, moving full steam ahead. I'm pleased to welcome you to this final session, the intersection between social and emotional learning and STEAM. I'm happy to introduce you to Henry Levin, the Kilpatrick Professor of Economics and Education, who was recently honored by CIES with a newly named lecture. Felicia Mensah is the past program coordinator and professor of science and education at TC. They are joined by two alumni, Cristiana, Assumpcao, thank you, the STEAM department head at Colegio Bandeirantes, and Leticia Lyle, the founder and the pedagogical director at Mindset Education. They win the prize for traveling the longest from Brazil to teach us college. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to Leticia.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Hi. So Hank's actually starting, but I just wanted to give a brief introduction of how we came together and how this panel came together. If you guys want to come, all of you, a little bit closer, it's kind to the center. I would love that. But basically, we, Cristiana and I, through the efforts of the Alumni Association here, we met in Brazil. And in the past 4 years, we've been talking and meeting through TC events. And last year, we actually worked together. And in a project which happened to be the theme of this year's festival, and it was a STEAM project, and I work with social emotional learning. We kind of managed to create this little case study, and it's been a success, and we wanted to share this with you. We also knew a lot about when we talked to Rosella, and we told her about our project when TC went to Brazil last year. Immediately when she found out the theme, which might have been selected because of our project, just saying, she contacted us and we started discussing and thinking about who would also be interesting people to be talking about this. I studied curriculum and teaching, so I knew Felicia. We know Henry from all of his research, and last year we also got in touch with him. So this panel kind of got connected through that. So I'm going to pass this on to Hank, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, welcome. So, as a faculty member, I want to give you a personal welcome. We love having you here. We love visiting. We love hearing about you, what you do, and so on. I have a very short period of time. That's what I was told. Mainly worry about the time. So just tell you, there is kind of a Brazilian connection. I have a Brazilian family. My daughter-in-law is from Minas Gerais, and it's a place where they have very beautiful women. Of course, they have those all over Brazil, but they have very special pão de queijo in Minas. Except I found out after my daughter-in-law was married to my son that she didn't cook.
Yes.
So we taught her how to make pão de queijo. I want to just introduce the topic of social and emotional learning because if you look at certainly the US system, all the emphasis has been on the cognitive side. All the emphasis has been on curriculum that can be tested, that can be assessed, schools that can be ranked, and so on what dimension? One dimension. And it's a very limited dimension. It's not just cognitive. Cognitive is much broader than what we do. It's a very narrow base for judging the quality of education. So I just want to go quickly through a little introduction to the topic, and then we'll make the links with actual projects. So my focus is what is social and emotional learning? Why is it important? Need for future development and recognition in schools, and then connecting it to the arts and to other areas. And what I'm going to, if I were to use one word, I would say integrating more than anything else. This is a study that just hit the press this past week on school readiness. 9,000 preschoolers in Baltimore were put into an early childhood program, a preschool program, a number of years ago. And this study was done by Johns Hopkins, and as you can see, March 2016. We're only 2 days after that. They used the Maryland model for school readiness. They wanted to find out if children going through the program were prepared to succeed in kindergarten and beyond. The teachers did evaluations of the preschoolers in terms of readiness for kindergarten, and then they did all the testing as well. I'll mention the areas in which they did testing in a moment. But in terms of other dimensions, is the child able to follow the classroom rules and routines? Does the child participate cooperatively in group activities? Is the child able to communicate with adults and other children? And there were other questions and other dimensions, but these were pretty central. What did they find out? Well, these children, one of the things we know is they grow, they get bigger, hopefully they progress in school. So what were the fourth grade results for these children? They categorized the children into basically ready or not ready for kindergarten based on the information that they had collected in the earlier assessment. Now, controlling for scores on language and literacy, general knowledge, and also physical development and health, also very important. So controlling statistically for those things at the time that they did the other evaluation, they found at fourth grade up to 80% of the children who were not ready were more likely to have been retained in grade. I won't even go into the implications or consequences of that, but they're not good. Up to 80% were more likely to require special education services, and up to 7 times more likely to be expelled or suspended from school at least once. These are fourth graders, they're not adolescents. And that's, of course, a big topic of discussion today. Okay, so what is happening here? Well, what is happening is that life is more than just cognitive knowledge, and evaluating life is more than just tests, certainly should be. So the area of emotional and social skills is a much broader area and says there are at least 3 broad areas that have to be developed for human growth and human competency and human welfare. One, of course, is cognitive, but a second is intrapersonal, and a third is interpersonal. Now, I put a reference here for those of you who want to go into this in more detail. You can find this easily on the web, and you can download the report free. This is the National Research Council, which is an arm of the National Academy of Sciences. So this is not just an opinion. It's based on a broad and very extensive analysis of the issues here. So what do we mean by cognitive? Well, they define cognitive as cognitive processes and strategies, critical thinking, problem solving, analysis, reasoning, as not the knowledge base or content skills, and I put their standardized tests because that's all that's measured by standardized tests. The standardized tests do not measure the first category, nor do they measure the third one, creativity or innovation. So when we say cognitive, you don't even want to dignify that term by saying, yes, that's what we assess, that's what we evaluate. We evaluate a very narrow frame of cognitive knowledge, and it's in a highly stultified, limited way. Intrapersonal competencies. Well, again, we reduce these to three: intellectual openness, and examples are flexibility, adaptability, personal and social responsibility. My favorite, curiosity. We should never, ever eliminate that from the essence of what is a child or an adult, and we do. Work ethic, conscientiousness, for example, initiative, self-direction, responsibility, persistence, and the third being a positive core of self-evaluation, self-regulation, self-monitoring, the ability to move forward, self-evaluation. And again, you can look at the details here, or I can refer you to other materials that go into detail on these. Okay, the third is the interpersonal dimension. Interpersonal deals with two large issues: teamwork and collaboration, communication, teamwork, cooperation, empathy, trust, the relations that we have with other people. And finally, leadership. Leadership responsibilities, and we believe that this means spreading leadership broadly, assertive communication, self-presentation, social influence. Sorry to run through these so quickly, but I just want to give you a picture of what it is we're referring to. Okay, these are important for adult development, and there's a lot of literature that connects them to productive citizenship, adult relationships, child rearing, worker productivity. I'm going to just mention worker productivity because I'm an economist and I study that. If we look at the total educational attainment of an individual in any society now, in terms of years of schooling, which is usually the way it's expressed, or you could say degree, but usually it's years of schooling, it is the most important single predictor of earnings. But if you try to look at what is the cognitive content of that measure, you can explain only about 20% of the relationship. That is, 80% is left to be explained by other school influences, by something else happening within those years of education. And if you want to say, let's get closer to actual work productivity than earnings, there are studies now of supervisory ratings of workers and their productivity, and you can explain only about 6% of the variance in supervisory ratings of workers by test results. So we had asked the question, what about the other 94%? Where do those come from? We don't see anything in tests about effort. We don't see anything in tests about collaboration. We don't see anything in tests about communication. A lot of the categories that I mentioned before in intrapersonal and interpersonal skills. So there's been a focus on testing. Testing of what? Testing on what appears to be the narrowest part of what seems to be affected in our human populations in schools. Modern testing has been around for a long time. it's largely limited to a few subjects and to some very constrained ways of measuring proficiency in those subjects. In contrast, non-cognitive, and if you look at this topic of social and emotional learning, a lot of people simply call it non-cognitive, or non-cognitive learning, or non-cognitive skills. So there is a mixture of language here, but far more dimensions of the non-cognitive than cognitive have been studied, and fewer of the non-cognitive are well understood in theory and measurement. That is, we're kind of much closer to the beginning of studying and measuring social and emotional learning and social and emotional skills than we are this long development of a technology of testing in the cognitive area. And we need to catch up, and we need to use these ideas more, understand them, and make them part of the mainstream. So what I'm finishing up with is this, that evaluations and focus in schools must integrate 3 dimensions. And these are not separate, actually. Integration, I mentioned, is important. When we say problem solving, a lot of people immediately say, what does the textbook say? How are we testing it? What kind of application? As if it were strictly part of a very narrow curriculum, a curriculum that is cognitive in nature, and evaluating the child is to evaluate the cognitive skills. But in fact, problem solving requires a knowledge base. Yeah, it does require information. It requires intrapersonal thought processes and orientations, the ability to use information, to observe, to take that information and put it in an analytic framework, intrapersonal. And it requires group collaboration and communication, because so much of problem solving has social implications and benefits from drawing upon the talent of others. So one way of thinking of this is that knowledge and cognition, as we traditionally look at it, is only one leg on a 3-legged stool. And I think you know what happens if you try to sit on such a piece of furniture. The last point is just this, changing STEM to STEAM. I wasn't part of that theme, but I had to ask myself, how can I, and using the word integrate again, integrate this presentation? Can the arts help to integrate STEM cognitive knowledge into a richer and more productive education experience? 3 question marks, you could have 10 if you want. But the answer is simple, yes. Because the arts embrace a much fuller human development, a much fuller notion of civic participation, culture, and the interaction of cognitive, interpersonal, and interpersonal skills. So all that I want to do is leave this up there for a few seconds. So at the end, those of you who are curious, love that word, who are curious about this topic, here is a wonderful source to get information, all kinds of resources that you can use to look at this topic. Thank you very much.
You know how to change the research.
Hi, it's a pleasure to have you here and pleasure to be here. It's an honor, actually. When Leticia, I haven't been back to Teachers College since I graduated in 2002, and I'm kind of emotional about this experience. So it's really interesting how this aspect, I've only been paying attention to this aspect of education since we started the STEAM program in our school. I was watching the other presentations here, and I learned a lot already about how the arts are bringing this component of bringing this other aspects and putting it all together, integrating it. And it's interesting that most of the spaces that I've been looking at, I mean, I was just at the NSTA presenting in Nashville, and I've always participated. I have a scientific background. I'm a biology teacher, actually, in my other life. And one of the things that's interesting is that I've noticed a lot of models, things happening in the lower grades, and also, with the little kids that where you still can make it, they still are curious, they still are expanding their knowledge and their skills, but also that most of the spaces, the maker spaces and the fab labs and all that's happening are being guided by artists, and the spaces that I've been looking at really is inspiring us are the artists, and that's where I'm learning a lot. So it's a challenge being a scientist and having to think with this other hat, because it's not in my background, and usually I was like, my childhood hero was Mr. Spock. So, totally logic. So it's been a huge challenge for me, but it's very exciting and learning a lot. So just to give you a context of where we are, in Brazil we are very low in the PISA scale. Just to see, there we are, way down there. We have gone up 3 points in the math, but even so, it's something that what he was saying just now was we only have a measurement of the content, and that's very limited, and that's the ruler. So when we started talking about STEAM and working hands-on and more maker movement, and we were really worried about how would the parents accept this, because the only ruler we have to measure is the vestibular, which is the entrance exam for the university. And we're classified. Our school is very traditional, and it's been there around for 72 years now. We are known for putting a lot of students into the universities, especially the public universities, which are free. And so the parents are willing to pay huge money to get their kids have more chance of getting to these there's a lot of competition for the spots in these universities. And the other challenge we have, especially in bringing this team, was that we only work with grades 6 through 12. And it seemed like the lower grade teachers learn a lot more strategies than we do of how to deal with this other aspect of because as teachers, our teacher schools, we learned how to deliver content. That was our role in the classroom. Okay, you're here, you're in charge of the content, make sure the student gets it. We have large classrooms. We have 2,600 students in one space. We have 12 classes currently. I mean, we have actually throughout the 3 grades of high school, we have 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. We have 1,800 students, so it's 12 classes with 48 students more or less in each one. So how can we work with the curriculum and change our curriculum in a way that we can work other aspects of the students? So that's where this team came in. It was a large discussion. We've been working with other types of projects for over 20 years. So we were just testing, making labs that we could try to learn how to work in a different way, in a different relationship with the students. So we had the science fair, for example, has been going on for 10 years. We have biotechnology project, robotics, mechatronics, all those after school activities. We had never, so we would offer it to 20, 30 students, so it was little labs that we could test out and really learn how to work like this, and also have more and more teachers learning how to work in such a way with the students. And we had a lot of science labs as well, so we had a ratio of 1 to 16 in those classes because we divided the class into 3. So each teacher would be working with 16 students. They would have a lot of equipment, so the school was always very technical, and it was founded by engineers and doctors. So they were always very concerned about having the best labs and a lot of labs in the curriculum. So we had that in our favor. But then we started talking about transforming these labs. So it's exactly those science labs that are becoming the space. So we have been working for years as the coordinator, the group of coordinators, we have over 22 department heads, and we were talking about how can we change this, and we were talking with MIT and talking with other, looking at fab labs, looking at maker spaces, and saying how can we bring that to our school, because we know, from all that we follow and we go to conferences, we look at the research, and we know that's the best practices, it has to include more than just delivering content. The student really has to build their, and be part of it and make sense of it. I mean, the content has to make sense to him. So we were talking about STEM in the beginning, and then there came a time when about a couple of years ago we said, well, that's not going to be enough. We're going to leave out a major component. And STEAM was just beginning to become a term at the time. And so the arts teacher, the department head of arts, joined our team of scientists, and so he started rocking our little box, and whatever we were thinking, he really got us thinking about other aspects. I learned a lot of what the arts bring today, because as a scientist, I did not know that. I thought, oh, you build something and make it pretty. That's the arts, and you're coming in. But I learned a lot, and that's not my vision today. So, and talking about how the arts could bring these other aspects and the skills that were being talked about, we thought were really important. So we can work creativity. I mean, we can really build projects and think about projects where the creativity component can be cultivated, and the students can learn to share and be curious and bring other aspects that we never have a chance in a normal class where everybody's just looking at you to work. Also, the innovation. I mean, we're talking about economy-driven, by innovation and creativity. The U.S. is the top of the game here, and Brazil really needs to develop this more. Our education is very much only content-based, and we know that. And even the research isn't very much cultivated in Brazil. We don't have too much of a research and development. So one thing is to really bring that aspect, and the kids begin to believe that they can work with that and bring innovation. And the arts brings that to us. And where I met Leticia was when we started thinking about the social-emotional learning aspect of it. How can we deal with the emotions? Now the kids are going to have more time, so we built a curriculum where they're going to have every week 200 minutes, 2 classes of 100 minutes each, where they're going to be building, it's a project-based curriculum, it's interdisciplinary, all the sciences and the arts, where we work with themes, the kids are given challenges, they have to build a prototype, so the engineering part of it, test ideas and do problem solve and all that. And they'll be working in groups, and they'll be learning how to give each other feedback, and they're going to be thinking about how can we systematically work with them so that they improve in that aspect as well. So we started looking at that, and Leticia will explain a little bit more about the work we developed there. We started looking at the material from Casel. We had a book that we found when we started searching for our social-emotional research, and but actually, and we had other things happening at the school to help work with the kids in that aspect. But we really felt totally lost. I mean, that's something we did not have in our background. I think if we had lower grades in our school, it might have been easier for us. We would have more specialists there. But that's something that Leticia really helped us a lot with. So, but one thing that I wanted to show you is one of the first projects. Here in this class, what they had to do was build a cube. And this is what they ended up with, out of their own initiative. So we noticed that the kids naturally, I mean, for them it's been hard as well, having them do things, because we've been teaching them to stay passive, sit down, be quiet, and listen to what I'm saying for 9 years. All of a sudden in 10th grade, I throw them in a room and say, you're going to build something, be creative, and so we have to teach them how to do that. And we saw that it comes out, they do want to identify with what they're doing, they want to work their emotions. So when they built the cubes, they had the objective of the class was to get them to learn how to use SketchUp and build a 3D, and then they would put it in a cutter, and just to see if they could do that prototyping, quick prototyping kind of thing, so for later on them to be able to build their project. But, and then in the end said, oh, can we erase our cubes? Can we give them personalities? So it's just so much in them, we just have to let it out. And I'm controlling my time. Just to go really quickly, just to give a context of where she's coming in, I'm just going to go, this was a poster I showed at a maker event in Brazil. We have a maker, Fabio is here also, I always see him there. There are a lot of initiatives, great initiatives happening in Brazil, and Fab Labs and maker spaces and all that. And we've been sharing a lot. So last year, when we were building this curriculum, one thing that was really important is that we involved all the teachers. So it's being built. There are 30 teachers working together in this. They are the ones writing the course. We don't have any reference in any school curriculum for that, especially in high school. I've been looking a lot. So we've been writing, the projects and how we had, what we could bring from our old labs, if anything, and how we could, and we thought it was really important for the teachers to be totally part of that, especially when we would have to build the matrix, the curricular matrix, so all the contents that we were going to cover with the different themes, all the abilities, that we were going to focus on with the students. We want the students to learn how to do this, and that. And one of the things is, through the art teachers, we learned, for example, we didn't know if all of them knew what STEAM meant. So in the middle of the process, we started, okay, everybody draw what you think STEAM is. And just changing the language, just changing how we were working, really made us think a lot about how we saw what we were building. And so we would then rehearse every single thing we were proposing. So the teachers would be teaching each other. We would visit different places, like the Museum of Light. One of the themes is light. And here we were, she's going to show better pictures than this. We had a social emotional learning workshop with Leticia, which really helped us think about the student we wanted to create and how we would get there. She taught us a lot of different strategies as well. And we had other consultants that would help us with project-based learning, how do you make a good essential question, a guiding question that will really get them thinking about what you want them to think about. And here we had the students, that some of the students, we gave them our, so we wrote this class, could you teach it for us, and let's see how you guys would do it. So we involved all of the stakeholders, the students, the coordinators, the teachers, and all of us were looking at the different perspectives, and we learned a lot from the students. I mean, they used some strategies that we would never have thought of, but that the kids seem to love. So it's really good to get them involved when you're building something for them. And then we rehearsed, so after we finished all that, we get together certain days for a longer period of time, and we rehearse ourselves. We are the students in all the classes that we are going to be teaching, so we can feel what the students will feel like in frustration, or if they're going to succeed. Usually the students are better at it than we are, actually, but we learn a lot, and we have a lot of fun in the process because we have been learning a lot from each other, working together, and a team of teachers from different subject matters is amazing. The dialogue is amazing, what we bring to it. So basically that's where we are. And Leticia will tell you then how we really focus on the social emotional learning, because that for me is the highest learning curve, and it's been an amazing experience.
Should I sit there?
Yeah.
Can you put the presentation for me? So while Chris is doing this, one of the things, Guimaraes, this school, is a very traditional school. It's one of the top ranking schools in the country. It's been around for 75 years, and it's because of this amount of quality work they do with their teachers. So Chris is like my hero, because she's the one that led this whole movement. So kind of, again, when Chris, halfway through last year, we met and she said, we need to address the fact that we're starting a program that is a STEAM program, and our faculty and our students are going to freak out. So basically that was what she said, and I said, yes, you do. And this was kind of, our premise was that, the STEAM programs, they require students to collaborate, solve problems, work in groups, think creatively, active, listen to one another, be empathetic, flexible, curious, and have many of the other soft skills, interpersonal, intrapersonal, in order to work. So they can be amazing, but those are things that need to be built. And like I said, Guimaraes is a very focused, driven school. That's the school you go to if you want to go to an Ivy League, transforming the example. And lots of those students, that's not a part of their repertoire. So it was a big challenge, and especially for the teachers who've been teaching in this school, and it's so prestigious, and they've been there. And they know how to get you to get to med school in a good university. that's what they know. Without, the idea is that without those components, it's likely that it's going to be much harder to get the experimental part working, and this suggested for us that, if we have to not only understand what social and emotional skills and what a social and emotional learning component would do, but we need to make it intentional, we need to make it a part of our curriculum, and specifically, we need to have it in our assessment and in our professional development. So those were the key elements we identified that could come up as an issue while implementing this last year in last August. So we actually, our school year starts in February, so we've been with the program now for 2 months, and I'll tell you a little bit of the process we did to transform this curriculum and then what we are at right now. So the stages we had were, first we developed the framework for this team program. So what were the competencies, what were the soft skills, what were the things we wanted to accomplish, and that's what we did our first workshops. Then we designed and planned some assessment tools to get that into their priorities, and then we had the implementation, and then the asterisk is there because we are now continuing with that professional development. But the first thing we did was the workshop with teachers and administrators. There's some, we worked with a concept of who is the student we want to create. Why are we teaching them? Why are we teaching STEM, STEAM, or whatever? And those were questions that the teachers had a really hard time answering. The first questions when asked were, I asked, like, so who's your student? Who's the student you want? Their answers were immediately, they're upper middle class students that really want to. They had already a script that did not really go back to the feeling part of it. So we actually had to do exercises to lead them through imagination processes, to think about their own kids or to think about themselves in 20 years. And we did this, there were 2 full-day workshops, so that was a lot of work. But this was kind of what they came up with, and this was actually one of the culmination of that process was getting them to specify what was it that they wanted those kids to have. And they came up, and this was a very important day. A lot of the teachers got very emotional because they actually got in touch with what were those priorities. What goes back to why are you teaching? Are you just teaching here because you want them to be great biologists, or you want them to be great biologists because it's important for the world to have great biologists? And they came up with these priorities. So their student is someone that has creativity, has self-knowledge, has autonomy, has solidarity, is able to do inquiry, which was a very specific word. They didn't want to do like a critical thinker. It was very particular. They had a long discussion, and I think it's interesting that the school specifically, they had that question. They wanted inquiries. They didn't, not necessarily critical thinkers, but they wanted people to question in a specific way, and commitment. After we developed that, my team, we developed within these frameworks, and so these are other constructs that you can also look. So CASEL is there. The OECD has a very interesting line of work in Skills for Social Progress, and they do link it a lot with development. So I really recommend that paper. And then we used some references in, for example, the Australian curriculum that came out last year with lots of integrated matrices of how you work with those competencies, and also the work that's being done in Chicago is specifically to try and transform schools. So we used all of those references to create some facets to these priorities. So, for example, the creativity aspect. So they decided that what was a facet of creativity? So It's someone that shows flexibility in problem solving. It's someone that is able to have aesthetic appreciation for nature and people, uses multiple intelligences to learn and create, and self-knowledge. I'm just gonna pass these, and I can send these to you if anybody wants them. But that was kind of, I wonder if this goes, no, I have to click. Kind of all of these little facets, so we didn't just stay in the big words, because that's the thing that happens all the time. Now that we have buzz, big words, collaboration, communication, but what is it that makes it collaboration? And specifically, what is it in this context that means collaboration? What is it that we want? So we have, for example, the autonomy will say he communicates efficiently and effectively. He identifies personal challenges and establishes goals. He is able to make responsible decisions considering consequences for self and others. And if you look at any of those other constructs, there are tons of different ways of saying these things. But this was the one that Bandeirantes and this group specifically, based on a lot of research, came up with. And it's beautiful. It's incredible. It does show Bandeirantes, and it's something that they created. So after that, we created attitudinal expectations. So again, going beyond the buzzword. So let's say in creativity, one of those facets is able to have aesthetic appreciation for nature and people. Once we did that, we created a continuum. So which are some steps that you could take to actually be able to have aesthetic appreciation for nature and people? So we came up with an observation component, so it's able to observe, recognizes and appreciates nature, observes connections between the arts and ideas behind them, researches and demonstrates interest in different forms of artistic expression, and expresses beauty his own way. So that's the definitions. He investigates the world in observation and interaction with natural beauty and works of art, the cognitive and sensible aspects that have created them, and analyzes intention and meaning. I mean, you could probably do a PhD course in this alone, but we kind of went overboard. It was an amazing chance to do this. And we didn't want to leave it superficial. So the next part of this would be then to actually give curriculum suggestions. So again, beyond just the buzzword and the definitions and how we're going to do this, because that's the big question. So in that scale, we gave them specific suggestions of activities that could be developed within their specific curriculum. So if you want to observe and describe the world around him with details, he could elaborate an observational digital portfolio in their lab unit. And that would be something specific that if you trace it back, it would go back to that creative student we wanted to. So this line of going through all these aspects, it's something really important, and that if we don't go all the way, it's very tough to actually say, yes, I am delivering a creative student. Show me where your line is going. And he could write an essay. He could write a video blog about an abstract piece of art that relates to their lab topics. So maybe they're writing about expressionism, I don't know. And then they could relate that to sound or music, or they could relate that to physics. I remember today we had, some of their labs are about sound and wavelengths, and we had a physicist that composed a piece of art. So that's one way that you can assess creativity in that connection. After we had all of those curriculum suggestions, we then started designing, planning, and assessment tools, and that was really important because, again, if this is not made as a part of the entire curriculum expectation, it's very tough to get a teacher to plan and go through all that work if in the end he is going to be measured by the A's and B's that his student is going to get, especially a high school student that needs to get into university. So if that's not a part of the entire system, it's going to be really tough to get it implemented. So we actually created a planning device where they would include content and skills and competencies, and then they would have group and individual settings, because that was also something they still needed to be individually tested. They needed to know the content. It wasn't an or, it was a both, and just giving different ways to all of them. We developed the rubrics for the general contents, and then this is an overall assessment of the project. So the project phase would be, you would have, during the classes, and then you have one day, and this is the project evaluation. So all of these things also have individual rubrics, but then they are for self-assessment and for the kids. This is what their final grade was going to look like. Imagine kids that only got, they knew that if they got 9 or a 9.5, they're getting an A. All of a sudden they get this. So, and especially the teachers, all of a sudden the teacher does not have to get right or, just the test assessment. He has to actually look at this. He has to look at the creative. He has to look at the participation, at how he is working with one another, how the product actually connects. So, and it's been going on. These are some of the pictures and the kids and the materials. And the kids are having the time of their lives, but we got stuck now with the teachers. Again, so we can do amazing transformation, but then we still need teachers, and they're the ones implementing this. So we actually discovered that it is essential to the success of the program. It is a long planning. When we implemented it at first, this was also a discussion: how are we going to, do we need to do this next year? Do we need to continue, or are we going to continue? What is going to happen? And we actually know we need this. Right now, I'm developing a teaching course with another institute, which is a school of education that is, they do a lot of projects in Brazil, and we're trying to connect them with TC. But basically, the idea is that to help teachers become those transformation aspects that can deal with content and the interpersonal and interpersonal skills, they need to be able to work with their self-knowledge, their self-regulation, their self-efficacy. They need to have information on why they're doing that. These are scientists, right? I can't just go there and say collaboration is good for the soul. I have to have evidence. It's not an option. We also have to work with them with their passion and purpose, which is connecting them back to this. All of the current teacher meetings have been a lot of frustration and tough, anger and everything. So we're actually having to address this because the teachers are bringing all of this anxiety out. And we also have to continuously work with them with curriculum and development and reassessment. So I think my time's up. So the next steps is we're actually starting, so for you guys to know, we're actually doing some social emotional development workshop for the teachers. So they're developing that on themselves. We are going to continue in figuring out how that's going to look for the continued education program. Then we're going to do follow-up and assessment, and then reevaluate specifically this matrix to see if it's working, if it's still the same, if it continues on or not. But basically, I passed it on to you with the challenge of educating teachers, especially for sciences and then all the other things that we need to be doing. So I'll put your presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Is this session over at 5? I just want to make sure that how quickly I talk or go through everything. But thank you for coming and participating with the festival. This is actually my first time being here for the festival, and I think this is not going to be my last time. I may be back next year. But I actually have the role of thinking about teacher education. So I'm a current faculty member here in the Science Education program, the Department of Mathematics, Science, and Technology. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is that idea that Leticia just left me with. What do we do with the teachers and how can we support teachers? So this is the pre-service part, get into the in-service. And so with me, it's a matter of, we have the keyboard.
Oh, sorry.
A matter like what happens when teacher education meets STEM. And I want to actually share with you this particular image. So I've had students to draw to me, draw for me, and asking them the question of what has been your science experiences? Or what do you think of that ideal or not so ideal teacher that you had when you were in school as a science learner? And I get images like this. And so what do you say? Give me a little bit of feedback. What do you see in the first picture?
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah. What else? Rows of seats. Yes.
Backwards to the kids.
Yes. And then in the second one, right, the teacher's back is to the children. So how can you pay attention to their social emotional learning when your back is to them and not really paying attention to them? And again, the children in the rows, so they're not sitting together, they're not having opportunities to collaborate. And so what I have found is that a lot of my students, these have been their experiences from K-12 all the way through college. And then they come to me, and it's different. Okay, so I wanted to actually did this slide more or less for me to kind of give me a checklist about the things that I've been doing in the science methods class to see what those components of social emotional learning, those components of art education, and what are those things are needed in collaboration with or in integration with the things that I have to do for science learning. So recently, I guess in the last 3 years or so, science educators have come up with the next generation science standards. And so with these 8 science and engineering practices, this is pretty much how they wanted to start framing and teaching science. And so how do you do that overlaid with this idea of thinking about creativity and innovation and all of that? And so again, that's kind of one of my challenges, but it's also a very exciting challenge to be able to do that and then to take the pre-service teachers through that experience. Because what they gain in pre-service is what I hope they will put into their in-service teaching with their students. So I'm actually going to talk to you about some of the in-service work as well to see what that actually looks like. So a year ago, I and 2 others, like one of my postdocs and another colleague from another institution, we have a delegation of about 40 Korean teachers that spoke their Korean language, and me with my southern accent and English, got together to try to talk about this integration of STEM and also a little bit of the art. And so what it is that these ideas that we have within science, like making observations. So being able to take and write, which is a primary skill that you have in the sciences, how do you make these observations and then draw your observations? And so for me, these are your natural integrations of art education. But the other thing around this, like, well, how do you make models and be able to think about those things that are out in the world that we want to be able to capture even in our drawings and then be creative at the same time? So one of the challenges that they had that we gave to them is like, how do you create an insect that can live in a particular kind of an environment? And these were some of the creations that they came up with. And so again, posing these questions for them to think about and think outside of the box, even though we did learn the content of what an insect was and what the different parts of an insect are, but then to take it to the next level and say, well, can you be creative and innovative and trying to develop your own insect that would live in its own particular environment? And this one, we started looking at for pre-service teachers. Again, this whole deal of making drawings. And so one of the things I had found out in their experiences, they did very little drawing. I drew all the time in my notebook. And so they did not do that a whole lot. And again, how do you marry those ideas of the science that you're collecting and even planning investigations, but even being creative? I'm sure you all, when you went to school, had to do the lab report. And so trying to think about, well, how can we do a lab report differently? Here they made a poster of it. So that's a different way of trying to reimagine the things that we have to do in the science classroom, but doing very differently and being very artistic about it. So one of the things I really love about the elementary pre-service teachers, they're very creative. Their posters are beautiful, and we hang them up in the classroom so that they can see them. But these are some examples. And we also do an activity where it's a genetics activity, and they have to draw their babies that they created. So again, this whole idea, like, how do you take the science content that I want them to know, but they're able to represent it in a very different way? And now the children. So again, for them to be able to think about the things that they're learning in the methods class, how do you transfer that over to students, the little ones? And so they have a lab component within the methods class, so the things that we're learning in the methods class, they are placed in the Harlem partnership schools that I work with, so they can work directly with the little ones to think about these same kinds of things. And so here the children are learning about adaptation, and they're using paper, cut out pieces of paper, almost like a mosaic, trying to represent the animal in his habitat. And then this one, they were able to learn about plants and flowers, but they were actually using pieces of paper for this as well. And another time that we did it, they actually took petals of flowers and redid these very beautiful pictures of the flowers themselves using the petals and then using other kinds of materials. So the same materials that are actually used in art, like yarn and colored markers and things of that sort, why not use those same things within the science classroom? And so now, again, this is on pre-service teachers. So another thing that we do is this idea around problem solving. Because of the engineering component now that we have in science, so again, posing a problem for them to be able to solve. And with this one, they actually had to solve, this is 2 problems. Over to the far left, they had the problem of being able to build a boat and how many pennies could the boat hold. So this idea of construction. So they were just very surprised at how many pennies a little full boat could actually hold. And so there's a natural integration with mathematics. So how do you count? How do you measure? How do you think about the parameters of your boat? And then the other picture here at the bottom was an engineering challenge of how do you take these balloons and think about building a tower as high as you can build the tower, but every resource that you use is going to cost you. So each balloon that was used is going to cost something. If you pop the balloon, it was an extraction, so it was a subtraction of the money that you had. Again, natural integrations of mathematics. But again, these ideas of collaboration, they had to talk about this. They had to come up with a plan together. They had to think about the, again, this idea of investigations, again, turned around to them to say, this is a problem that the group has to solve. And we want everybody to have input in this problem solving task and to come up with something together. And so, and then there's another student for even demonstrations. I didn't put communication here. But even communication, I think it's on the next slide, maybe. Let's see. Oh, it's not. but this whole idea of communicating. So they have opportunities to actually even co-teach together with each other in the methods class, and also building that kind of teacher collaboration together as they support each other in learning the pedagogy as well as learning the content. And then literacy. So a lot of the ideas around environmental literacy, civic literacies, writing in general, all these different kinds of things can be placed within the science learning of the classroom for the teachers to learn. Again, as pre-service teachers, that you want them to be able to take these skills back with them into their own classroom. And so again, this idea of writing posters, and so children being able to write, they were studying the moon. We had a moon project that actually turned into a community day. So we also had the parents to come in as well. And the hall room was really decorated looking at the universe. And so how did they write about that? And it's creativity, it's creative writing projects. Technologies around, literacy around technology. So being able to use simulations in the lab. So if you see the picture where we're using simulations at the bottom. So students also using other forms of technology to enhance their learning of the content. But then how do you use these technologies again in the classroom with the little ones as well? And then in nature. Nature is full of beauty, full of things that can be creative and innovative. And then this idea of going out into nature and drawing what you see. So again, these ideas are observations. And then that's another picture of one of the beautiful posters that they tend to produce in the classroom. And then this last picture here, I had them even think again about their science experiences. And so they do science timelines. And the science timelines show what their experiences were like in elementary school, what their experiences were like in middle school and high school, and then what they hope to gain out of the methods class. And so through these timelines, they're actually being very reflective, because if they had bad experiences, I do not want them to transfer those bad experiences to their little ones. And so for them to also be aware of what their science learning experiences are like. So this whole idea of literacy is having a very broad understanding so that they can develop a much broader base of what science is, and what science learning could look like. And collecting data, measuring and testing, experimenting. And so again, teaching students in the classroom how to do kind of like, you might can say basic science learning, but how do you set up an experiment? How do you collect data? How do you analyze that data? And getting students very early to think about all those experiences. Again, the picture with the little boy outside, I actually had little paper meter tape that we produced, and they were able to color it and then take those outside and just measure things. So again, being outside in nature, wondering about the things that are going on with them, but at the same time collecting data and then coming back to the classroom and doing analysis of all of that. And communication and movement. So this is one of the skills too that often does not get much play, I should say as a pun as too, within the science classroom, but how do you even have motion and movement in the classroom? So at the far corner students, I didn't actually have the play in this, but they were actually just doing motions of the water cycle. They also did motions of, I think this was energy at the top, so moving around and exercising, and so the children were doing very similar things too. So how do you take all this energy that little ones have and kind of like repurpose it for the sake of trying to develop their social emotional learning as well? And so this whole idea is also around communication. So how do students communicate differently than just sitting in rows in those first images that we saw and only listening to the teacher, or the teacher standing with her back to everybody and just writing and copying all the notes down, but really having a re-engagement of science so that it looks very differently and students are engaged in a very fun and exciting way. So that's it.
Okay, so, wait, I'm supposed to. Okay, so we have like 12 minutes, and then I think we are all going to take questions.
Hello panelists, and thank you for speaking today.
I think we need this, otherwise the video won't hear you.
Thank you. I'm an incoming doctoral student, and I enjoyed your presentations. My questions is, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Every Student Succeeds Act. No Child Left Behind was replaced by this act in, I think, November or December of last year. And we're currently redoing how we're going to be measuring and evaluating our schools and our teachers. And a big part of this is one of the exciting things that SEL advocates have been talking about recently is the bill actually tells schools to use non-academic measures to assess their schools and the performance of their students. And I'm wondering how you guys see SEL skills fitting into this. And there's been some, notably Angelina Duckworth and Martin Seligman, who are huge leaders in this movement. They're really worried about schools using these SEL measures, and they're turning them into things that they're not really meant to be used for and evaluative purposes. And they're kind of worried about that, all that standardized testing movement, all of that kind of stuff, and how it kind of watered down those assessments. They're worried about that happening with this new kind of legislation. So could you guys please speak to that?
Well, I'll speak very briefly. I mean, the points that you've raised are really important points. I mentioned that the testing movement has been going on in its modern form for 120 years. It goes back much farther if you go to China and you look at the civil service exams, and much more than 1,000 years ago in China. So I mean, we're really talking about testing movement where there's an attempt to meet certain kinds of standards in terms of validity, internal validity, external validity, reliability, all of those kinds of things. And we're very far from that in terms of social and emotional skills. In some areas, there's been more progress than others, but let me just give you one quick example. He mentioned Angela Duckworth. Angela Duckworth developed a concept and measure called grit. And the idea is that kids need persistence. They sometimes need to struggle with work. And if they don't, if they just simply give up, they're not going to learn very much. And so how do we bring that into the curriculum? The KIPP schools have tried. And how do we measure that? And after about 5 years of extensive work in doing it, she came out with what many people consider to be a shocking academic article, which said, let's hold up on actually using that for the moment, because the information we have is basically derived from self-reports. And self-reporting has all kinds of problems. In other words, where the students report how much effort they've put in, getting into a given situation, where they put in more effort, under what conditions, and so on and so forth. And it's very, very variable and very subjective, and yet it's being used already. So I think what I would say is we have to worry about the use outpacing the understanding and the foundation that we're using. Now that doesn't mean we give it up and say, well, we don't do it. It means that we recognize that, and as we get confidence in what we're attempting to do, the measures and the mechanisms, we adopt, and we're constantly monitoring. It's another thing. This is something which is coming into being. It's not something which is set.
Yeah, just if I can compliment is that we can't stop. I mean, again, if you make proposals like this one we did to Bandeirantes and you propose it to be reassessed all the time and you don't consider it the Holy Grail, especially because, Hank said, we don't know yet exactly. We're now coming up with longer longitudinal studies that can say, this entire population in Sweden that did this is what the social emotional outcomes got them to. But we're still not there, but that doesn't mean that we can't keep trying, especially because this is so immediate. And there are lots of other proposals of curriculum and school reforms that consider this. Let's include social emotional learning, or let's include buzzwords. So we all want collaboration, but how does that look like? So I don't know if I answered your question, but he probably did. Anyone else?
I just have one comment because I understand perfectly how it's a problem if they transform a tool that was used for something, an instrument. That's what the assessment is, what we're really looking for. But on the other side, in Brazil we have very little data. Like I know that the testing here and all the teaching to the testing, all that's come up, but at least you have some data and some longitudinal studies, and you know the impact of certain actions. And in Brazil, the situation is the opposite. I mean, we have some standardized testing, of course, far from being perfect, but at least you can start making decisions and looking at some data to drive the ways that we're going. So it's not, it's going to be a huge challenge finding a way of measuring this, but we have to keep looking because the data makes very much a difference. You want to say anything?
Anyone? Sorry. Her? All the way in the back. And then, oh no, we have to answer, sorry.
You talked a little bit about having your teachers be on board with the professional development and how hard this is for them to get up to speed. Has there been any work to measure, while undoubtedly richer, it's also harder for the students, right? Because there are more dimensions, as Hank referred to, that they have to get up to speed, right? In some ways it would be easier to just do the cognitive without the collaborative work as well.
Yeah. Chris, go ahead. So we actually thought a lot about this. We wanted to, we met with the tech department at Colégio Bandeirantes to see if we could start creating, graphs, or if we could use some sort of assessment. We came up with great ideas, but this was still too far. For the second semester, the idea is to actually try to make these more open forums and get them to do more of the self-reflection. What we are seeing is that the biggest thing that's showing up right now, the red alert, is with the teachers. They have to plan for the next 2 years of curriculum, and they can't, because every single meeting is hijacked by their anxiety, by their frustration, and the students are going. Some of them are having a tougher time, especially because Bandeirantes is still a ranked school, so the top students stay in class A, B, C, D, and so on. So they're having a hard time, but they're having much less of a hard time than the teachers. What I predict, and then Chris can compliment, is there will be a big problem with the parents. So that was the administration's issue last year. They had several meetings that the parents kind of like ganged up and were very upset, and some of them were very frustrated. There was some that were supportive. But I think eventually when these new test results that are the official tests come up, the boycott is going to be in this different way of teaching. So that's why it's, it was such a courageous thing for this school to kind of go through this process. But
As Leticia was saying, that I think teachers never had to really deal with their own feelings about, they would go there and detach themselves and do a professional, I'll deliver my content. So our meetings have been hijacked by this, it's becoming like group therapy, we're teasing that. The teachers spend most of the meeting talking about, so we even created a channel, a back channel, emotional back channel, where one of the teachers who is also a psychologist, psychoanalyst, she's been talking to the teachers in parallel to try to channel all of these anxieties in a different way so that we can have our meetings back to produce the next 2 years of the courses. We're still waiting. This is the first year we're implementing it. We're a little anxious about how this will impact when they start measuring with the university entrance exams, if there's going to be an impact, But one thing that we've been having a lot of studies is we've seen that what we were already doing was decreasing our efficiency. I mean, we weren't getting such good results as we were before. So it's already proven a model that was not working for these students anymore. The students have changed too much. So one thing that happened was, first, when we were doing this first quarter, the teachers wanted to take out the open studio part of where the students would build something. They said, no, we should continue to have more guided classes, but I think the students still don't have enough skills. So I had a lot of trouble convincing them, no, put your foot in the water and just test the water, see that the students, they can do it and you can do it. And now we're going to be grading in teams as well. They don't feel comfortable enough to give the students like a participation grade. We had a grade for each class. We made a measurement for if they participated well or if they handed in whatever they had to hand in that class, so that the students also realize that every part of their participation is important, but the teachers don't feel comfortable enough to grade that, to say, oh, they participated well or not. So they're going to talk about it in the groups of teachers that are working in that class, and they're going to do it together. That's one strategy they found to feel a little bit more comfortable. But it is the teachers learning to teach in this way. That's a huge challenge.
Thank you. Just about your experience, very similar related question in terms of professional development. I'm wondering if you've thought about how to get teachers give them more ownership of the professional development. And I'm thinking about this because at the school where I teach here in New York City, like one of the core things about how we do professional development is that teachers, like, our responsibility to plan and lead the professional development. So it just ensures that teachers have ownership of it, and it's going to work for them. And it's not a perfect system; we're still developing it, but I feel like that's a really important thing. I'm just wondering if that's something that maybe you're thinking about. I think it's tougher when you're trying to take a traditional model and shift it to a new model. So I wonder if you're evolving in that direction.
I'm probably going to want your card after this, so you can give me some suggestions. But like she mentioned, a lot of the discomfort that was going on with the teachers, there were a few teachers that they were the ones that brought it up. So this movement to create the back channel to do that communication was a biology teacher that was so frustrated that she had spent a whole year planning for the implementation. Everything was going great and everybody else was frustrated and unhappy with themselves. So she's the one that started this, and there's another teacher who's actually the one that's been the victim, because he's such a champion of the program. He's been the victim of a lot of people saying, oh, you're the one that's the teacher's pet. The teacher's pet. So he is actually trying to create a more, one of these workshops we're doing, and we're actually doing it in May. He's helping me develop it. So we're getting some of that input, but afterwards, please tell me. I think it's a great idea. I think we have to design that process. But yes.
The way we design the whole process, we use design thinking with the teachers. We try to bring as much of their ideas so that they felt ownership. That's really important for them. That teach in such a different way. We try to make sure that their ideas were heard. We did a World Cafe recently where they would put up their ideas for the next themes and they voted on so we really want them to feel that we're listening to them and they're part of it. It's a balance between, but I can't let them totally take it to where they want to go because they want to go back. So I have to keep pushing them forward. So, it's like, yeah, sure, we can do this. As long as you do this, I'm going to take it forward. So it's always a balance we have there.
I think one more, or our time is up. I said it.
I think, thank you all very much for the wonderful presentation, and thank you all for coming. And please stay around supporting our students, supporting Alumni Council, and hope to see you all next year.
Thank you. Yay. Thank you. This is my card. I found it.